Hi, I'm Elizabeth Sherman, and today I'm doing an interview with Sally Otis. She was born in Brooklyn, New York. She currently lives in Sherwood, and she grew up in Union Springs. And you'll hear Joan Parsnick with me in this interview, so you've probably heard her in other interviews I've done as well. And Sally talks a lot about her memories of growing up in the village and of her father, Bob Doremus. So enjoy my interview with Sally Otis.
My name is Sally Otis. I was named Sarah, but I was never called Sarah. So I'm known as Sally. And now I'm living in Sherwood, New York. I married a man that lived up here. And I grew up in Union Springs.
How did your family come to live here?
My family was the Doremus family. That was my father's last name. And his father came from Ovid, New York, and brought his wife, who was my grandmother, Grace Doremus, because he was a pharmacist and he was looking for a drugstore, a job, and Union Springs had an opening. They were looking for a pharmacist. So he took the job and came and started the Doremus drugstore. And he was a very hard worker, as I understood. He died when I was a little more than a year old, so I never really knew him. The word is that he enjoyed hearing my footsteps as I was learning how to walk, and we were living with him, he and my grandmother, on 7 Seminary Street in Union Springs. My father had been drafted and was in England during World War II, working in a photo lab. So my mom and I stayed with my grandparents. But I also had my other set of grandparents were on Chapel Street, 6 Chapel Street, and that was the Davises, my mother's family. So we would move back and forth between the two households, as I understood, as I've been told. And then my grandfather passed away in 1944, and we, as I understand, moved in permanently with my grandmother on Seminary Street, and that's where I grew up. That's where I lived the rest of my life. Initially, I was actually born in Brooklyn, New York. My dad had a job after he graduated from Pratt Institute and was working with some other illustrators and artists in New York. And he and my mom had an apartment, and so that's where I was born. But then he was drafted, and I was 2 months old, and up we came to Union Springs. And I've been there since I married, and then moved here to Sherwood.
Oh, so what memories do you have of growing up in the village and things like that?
Well, I have I've been thinking about this, and I was wanting to talk, I guess, maybe a little bit about, maybe I'll start with Dr. Woodford. Dr. Woodford was our family doctor, and he had a house on Main Street, and that he would see patients. And you went in on the porch on the north side, and if you were sick and needed some pills, you could call, and he would set out some pills out on the railing of the porch. And you could just stop by, and there would be your name on this little white packet, and those were yours. So you take them home and get better.
Wow, that's something.
Isn't that something? And he was a wonderful doctor. He made house calls. And when I was about 12 or 13, I developed scarlet fever. That seemed to be going around the school, and my girlfriend got scarlatina, which was not quite as bad as what I had, but I was sicker than a dog, and I was in bed. And Dr. Woodford would make house calls, come see me. Come up the stairs, put his bag on the bed, and I'd just like go, oh, maybe another shot or something. I thought I was dying. and he pulled me through, I guess, or
Yeah.
here I am.
Yes.
That was a really scary time. I thought, golly, my throat was never so sore as it was that time with the scarlet fever, and a fever and so forth. But he was just an amazing, amazing doctor. And my girlfriend Elaine Day and I, she was Elaine Osborne and I, she lived on Park Street, and so we would cross over there through the Zeller's yard, and together we would go down to Dr. Woodford's to get a shot. We both were very frightened of these shots, but it seems like I sort of remember holding hands and going down to Dr. Woodford's. So you would sit in the office, and along with many other people, and he had this one amazing display of birds in this glass receptacle or something. And you could sit there and look at the robin and the oriole and they were sitting on these branches as you could, sometimes you could hear what he's talking to the other patient in the office. So, yeah. The other day we drove by, it was a while ago, actually, and I said to my husband, Dr. Woodford's house is gone. And by gum, he didn't believe me. We turned around, went back, and by gum, it was gone.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, what memories have disappeared, because so many people that grew up in Union Springs know about that porch and all the medicines that were laid out on the porch. And my dad, I had a small car accident this was back, I was in college, down near Cayuga, coming out of near Mudlock, near where the locks are, and called my parents, of course, and they came and took me home. But in the meantime, on the way back to Union Springs, my dad had a heart attack as he's driving. Now, maybe my mom was driving. I don't remember. But we went right to Dr. Woodford's, and he took my dad in and soon called the ambulance, and that actually turned out well, because my dad lived to be 96 and a half, so I was very appreciative that the doctor was right there at home.
Yes.
So that's a memory I have of Dr. Woodford. And okay, now I was thinking about the summertime in Union Springs. It was always a fun time. I'd roller skate, and that was so frustrating. And now there are these beautiful roller skates that people can wear, and they stay on and they fit. They go in your whole shoe. We had these things that clamped on your shoe, and you had to have a key and tighten them up, and the sidewalks were so rough. Oh, it was just such a frustrating time. I can remember going along on Main Street, just bump, 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 and then off came the skates. So that's one memory.
Did your grandfather did someone run the pharmacy after your grandfather passed away?
No, I don't believe so. But one story about that pharmacy, as I understood, was he was the pharmacist, and he had all the medicines there, and that it could only be open if he was in the store.
Oh.
Because he knew about the medicines and how to use them.
Mm-hmm.
He also made, this is jumping back to my grandfather, but he made ice cream. And he was famous for the ice cream that soda fountain was. People stopped in, and young people from Farley's would walk up in the evenings for milkshake or sodas. And my mom worked there, as she helped make the sundaes and so forth. So that continued. I'm not sure whether. Oh gosh, I was trying to remember the name. Maybe who bought it from my grandmother. But it was not a pharmacy anymore.
It was a lunch.
A lunch
soda.
counter and ice cream counter, yeah.
What address or what building would be there now? If we
It was where the Be Happy Cafe was.
Oh.
And now it's like next to that new restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of that name.
Salt of the Earth,
Salt of the Earth, correct.
right next door.
Now, the people, what are their names that bought that? That slipped my mind right now.
Well, it's a liquor store now. Liquor and
No, that's next door, I believe.
oh, that's next door.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I think there was some talk that Salt of the Earth may move over, may enlarge. I don't know.
And that would be into the area where the
Drugstore
soda
was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Now, my grandfather also, I'm jumping away from summer, I'm jumping into winter, but he would cut ice from the lake, and then they would bring it up in wagons, I guess, pulled by horses, and store it in the a barn that was behind our garage on Seminary Street. Mm-hmm. And as Claire talked about in her talk, that they layer it with sawdust and to keep it, and it would keep, they could use it throughout the year. And she mentioned how clear it was, that it was really people wanted ice from the lake because it was so beautiful. That I hadn't heard that story, but I knew that they did cut the ice, and my father was able to donate all the ice cutting machines, equipment that was in our garage to the Genesee Country Village for their display. So that was nice that they were willing to take that. So back to summer in Union Springs. As kids, we would walk down to the park, and in the morning there was arts and crafts, and we learned how to do boondoggle and different kinds of artwork, and that was always fun. Your friends were often there, and it was just a fun morning. Then you'd go home and get yourself back in the afternoon after lunch for swimming. Mm-hmm. And swimming lessons went on in the afternoon there. I'm sort of remembering being in the beginning class, and it was sort of in a cage, and I could be not remembering this correctly, but it seemed like we were standing in a wire cage and maybe that was because it was so rocky. We weren't bringing in sand or anything. It was rocky bottom, and it was sort of like had walls, little bit of walls, and this floor that was wire. I never really, even though I took lessons, I was not a strong swimmer, and I enjoyed it, but I didn't become a good swimmer. My brother was a good swimmer, and he became lifeguard down there. And I know that seems like at the end of the summer, they had swimming to the island and back. Well, glory, I couldn't even make it to the raft that was out there floating. But so many kids swam to the island and back, or maybe they got a boat back. I don't remember that part, but. And then there was, they would go and camp out at the island. So it's too bad that the island is now so covered with poison ivy, and I'm understanding that the cormorants are taking over. And that's sad to hear that too. Anyways, that was a little bit of summer, and I remember you get walking home from the lake and you were cool, and then you get home up Seminary Street, and boy, you're ready to go back and jump in the water again. But so that's how we might spend our days. Okay.
You talked on the phone about what was going to school like.
That's right. Going to school back in the, I would say, early 50s. there wasn't enough room at the building, this Union Springs High School building, or the building that was the school building, for all the children that were coming along. So they found different spaces within the village and outside the village, in fact, up into Fleming, to house the various classes of kids. So when I was in second grade, I was sent to Fleming School, and a yellow school bus came up Seminary Street and picked me up. And Clyde Lowry may have been the bus driver then. Anyways, it was a yellow, I remember it was a yellow bus. And we would go, obviously, and pick up other people and end up in Fleming. So I was in the old firehouse that was a white building. It's sort of across from the current firehouse now. And we were on the second floor, and Mrs. Healy was our teacher. And she had a little hot plate, and she would warm up soups for our lunch. And after we had lunch, we would walk down south to a little schoolhouse that's still there, but it may be a home now, but that's where the third grade met. But they had a playground, and we played with them. We played there on the playground. And then we'd walk back and finish up our day and then ride the bus back home. That was second grade. So then third grade, I was placed with Mrs. Chisamore, and we were in what had been a jewelry store, which was on the corner of Main Street and Factory Street. And now I think you and I talked, I think it's a bait store maybe, or
Yeah. Yes, that's what it is now.
okay. That was my third grade and fourth grade. But in the middle of fourth grade, perhaps we moved down to the building. That I'm quite clear about. But there were other classes that were being held on the second floor of that strip of buildings on Main Street. So they were using whatever they could find. And I think in the Presbyterian church, they had the kindergarten. Maybe. Or they had another class there in the basement of the church. And so then they ended up adding on to the school, and there was room for people. I do remember my first day in kindergarten. And that was, I did go to the big school down that now is still there. They did not have any furniture for we small children who were kindergarten age. So we sat at these big grown-up tables, big grown-up chairs, came up to our necks practically. And I had gone to school in a yellow dress, and so drinking my chocolate milk for lunch spilled all over this yellow dress from that high table. That I remember my mother just, as well as I banged my head on a swing out on the playground, so I had blood on the dress as well. So when she saw me walk home, it was like, oh my. I've sent my daughter off for one day at school, and she's coming back looking in bad shape. Oh, dear me. So, but eventually we got smaller desks and tables and chairs for that kindergarten class. But I turned out to be a sickly young lady, and I was not in school often. So my poor desk got moved to the corner because I was hardly ever there. Anyways, Mrs. Lewis, who is still alive, was my teacher. She was Miss Spring at that point. And it's just amazing that she is over 100, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
But she was the kindergarten teacher, and kindergarten was just beginning. I may have been the first year. I think my husband, who was a year older than I, did not go to kindergarten because it wasn't required at that point.
Was that at A.J. Smith's school, what it is now? A.J. Smith? No,
No,
no.
it was down at down at the high school.
Oh,
No, AJ was built later. I don't know when, but after my time.
Yeah, that's where I went to. I went to 1 through 3rd was at Cayuga, and then 4th grade through 6th grade was at AJ, and then
Uh-huh.
the 7th, so middle school to high school was at, the high school. But, yeah.
I just remembered another thing about summer was the carnival.
oh,
The carnival at in Union Springs, the Fireman's Carnival was,
Yeah.
and it may still be, but it was a huge event because
Yes,
it was.
was.
It was a social event that you went to.
Mm-hmm.
You saw your friends,
Yeah.
And it was the end of July, and usually the weather was nice, and
Yeah.
it was I just remember it being a very social time.
Yeah,
and
it was
they
very
had
fun.
the Ferris wheel, and they had the swings, and it took me a while. I never rode the swings. I was a little frightened about that, but I love the Ferris wheel, and seeing my friends,
Mm-hmm.
hanging out with them, and the parade. The parade was always a fun thing. It was an event. It was something
Yes.
you did.
Yes, I
You could-
remember always enjoying that as a kid.
Looking forward
So.
to that. Yep. But I don't know how that's going now.
Yeah.
it's kind of the signal for the end of summer.
Yeah. Yeah, they don't do the carnival anymore, actually, so that's...
Yeah.
Well, I thought it was the end of July, but
Right.
which is not quite the end of
Right,
summer.
not
but
really.
anyways,
Right, you're right.
Yeah. Mhm. But that was a fun time.
Yes.
And maybe they'll do it again.
Maybe.
Now, I was also thinking about a store that was across from where I went to school. It was Mr. McGlynn's variety store. I don't know what he called it, but he was an older man, and he had this store on Factory Street and Main Street, but it was on the south corner, and it was just full of like little trinkets and toys and all kinds of little things. And the floor was wooden, and as you walked around looking at all of his displays, the floor was creaky. And I was speaking with someone else, and they said yes, and he always followed you around as you were looking. That I don't remember, but that could be to make sure that you didn't slip something into your pocket by mistake. Anyways, Mr. McGlynn, that was his name. That was an interesting thing. Now, in talking with Claire Morehouse, we got talking about, she mentioned it, and she said, oh, I should, and so I'm going to tell this story, that there were 3 buildings that neither she nor I, and I'm sure others, never walked in. We walked by them. One was the Astoria Hotel. And I would walk by it, and wonder, what goes on in there? But that was not a building that I was either allowed to or ever had, thought I should go into it and see anything about it. The other one was Dick's Den. I think that's what it was called. Now, other people may have a better memory. That was on the top, in walking to school, it was on the top of the hill. And it was just a little shack like where you could buy candies and soda and people walking back and forth from school might stop in and do something. But boy, that's not a place I would have wanted to go into it. And the other place was like the grill. The grill was, I didn't walk by that, but that was outside of Union Springs, going towards Cayuga. That was just a building that, no, didn't go in that either. So, yeah.
Just not a place children.
Not for
Yeah, no,
children or, late teens, early teens or whatever. Right. Right.
Didn't.
What special memories do you have with your dad that you remember? Or anything like that?
Well, with my dad, my dad was very driven to work. And he knew that if he didn't get jobs, he didn't have money coming in
Yeah.
to help his family. So he was it was just very much part of his, and he was a high intensity man. And I know that he was very, about the telephone. We had to not talk on the phone during business hours because he didn't want to miss a job. His agent in New York City, and that's what he decided to work with. How he made his career work was he had agents, an agent, and she worked with him for many years. And she would go out and find work for him in these publishing companies. And so they would call him, or she would call him and offer him the job, and he would then take it, and then it would all be coming through the mail. So I remember, you come home from school from being with your friends, and then you just need to talk to them again. So I had to wait till evening to do that. But that was one thing, was about the telephone. Also, I remember, I think, I only saw perfection in art from my dad, so that I felt like I couldn't draw perfect. I didn't have the artist talent in me, in my hands and I just couldn't do it perfectly, so I wasn't a good artist. I got to know my dad, I think, better after he lived longer. He was, he sort of was, he was more relaxed. He didn't need to
Yeah.
earn the income to support his family and so forth. So that was good. We had those years together.
There's stories about him asking different people in town to model for things he was doing. I'm sure you were a model
Well,
for him.
it turned out he says that I genetically was not easy for him to draw from, because I was not either my arms were too long or my legs were too long or whatever. I wasn't built in a good shape. So no, I did not pose for him. I don't remember posing.
At least that you didn't know you were.
Yeah, well, he never, I don't remember him ever drawing from me. And that was because he said I just didn't have the right proportions. But yes, many young people in Union Springs, they're older people now, but have fond memories of coming and working for my dad. And my mom would get the costumes all laid out. And that they would need to wear to portray whatever my dad was drawing. So they'd get dressed up and, stand in a pose that he would tell them where to put their arms and legs and stand or sit or whatever. And they were paid a little bit. I don't know how much in those days, but they could tell you what they got paid. And they all enjoyed it.
Was there a special room in the house he used for?
Yeah, it was a living room that he, the main living room, yeah. He put down a white canvas on the floor, and he had these, there were 2 lamps maybe that he strung up and would light towards the, whoever he was modeling. Yeah. And then he would stand, and then he had a dark room, and he developed his own pictures, that he drew from. He put them in little strips, and then he would use the magnifying glass to work on. His studio was upstairs in what could have been a bedroom in the southwest corner of the house. So that was worked for him. And my mom worked with him right along. She would look through magazines, look through newspapers, whatever, clip items that she thought maybe would be helpful in research if he had to do, because often his books were maybe historical. Not entirely. He did a lot of children's books that just take seconds to cross off the ones that don't match, or circle all the ones that start with this letter or that letter. And that kids just whip through them. But my dad was very careful in making sure that if it was a raccoon, that it looked like a raccoon, and he did very good work, very detailed.
So there were two. You had one sibling, right?
I had one sibling.
Okay.
Yes, my brother Malcolm Doremus. He was 4 years younger than I was. And likewise, I don't remember him posing for my dad either. So interesting.
Maybe he let you have that time off.
Oh, maybe.
That freedom.
Freedom, yeah. Yeah. Interesting. And he would, in the summer, as a family, we would take one day. He said, well, we can go away for one night. So we would plan our trips as to where we could go, stay overnight, and then come back home. So we would go to the Adirondacks or Saratoga Springs. And he didn't realize that in August, and that's usually when we went, that everything doubles prices in Saratoga. It's a racing month.
Yeah.
So everything doubled. And and that was before credit cards, so that was sort of hard because they had only planned so much cash, and
Yeah.
the credit card wasn't there. But those vacations were interesting. Going to Lake George and Old Forge. Yeah, I have nice memories of doing those things. Yeah. That's one thing I wanted to mention was about that we attended the Presbyterian Church in Union Springs, which is now the Frontenac Museum. And in fact, that's where I was married. Dill and I were married there 55 years ago this year. So I grew up in that church, and we went as a family every Sunday. My grandparents, both sets of grandparents have history with that church. So, and Sunday school, we had just a lot of kids. Sunday school was very, very active and very busy, and every Sunday we go to a Sunday school class. And at Christmas time, they had a Christmas party, and we had Santa Claus would come. And that was always Oscar Shalepi.
Oh.
And he would come and peer through that window that's on the south side, looking downstairs. We were all downstairs. And we'd look up and, whoa, there he was in the window. How exciting, or a little bit scary, And then he'd come walking in, ringing his bells and so forth. So he was always the Santa Claus. Always. And that went through many, many years.
There was space and tables and all that for dinners too. Weren't there dinners?
There were dinners. Yeah, they would have like Easter. Seems like we had Easter sunrise service maybe And I became involved in the wider Presbyterian youth and attended meetings in Syracuse. That was when I was in maybe 11th grade, 12th grade. And I enjoyed the friendships there that I made. There also were conferences held at Wells College. And I remember going to at least a couple years of those. Would be 1 week. You'd go and stay at Wells. And it would be all young people your age, or my age, that were there. And I don't remember what it was called or who sponsored it, whether it was only Presbyterians or whether it was youth. That memory is...
Camp Gregory. Was Camp Gregory a part of
Camp Gregory was going, and but I was developing allergies, and it just was not a good place for me. I would maybe last one day, and then I'd need to come home, either with bad headaches and I may have been homesick too. So Camp Gregory was not really an integral part of my growing up, though for my brother it was, and it certainly, that's where I met my husband. He was my brother's counselor. I rode with my parents one Sunday afternoon to take Malcolm to camp and met his counselor. So
that worked
our
out
history
well.
began.
Yeah.
That was a long time ago. Right.
Then Camp Gregory looked pretty good.
Camp Gregory looked very good. And then since then we have been directors and been involved in the camp over the years. So yes.
Now you and Dill worked as lived on Seminary Street, or did you where did you move once you were married?
Well, when Dill and I got married, well, I'll back up a minute. I went to Cortland for 4 years and became an elementary teacher. I worked 2 years in Camillus at West Genesee School, and then Dill and I were married. We moved here to this house. And this half was somewhat not in use because the people had passed away, that his great aunts and so forth, that it was just full of furniture and things. So we decided, his mother said, why don't you clean this out and turn it into a house? Don't put a trailer on the land. So that's what we did. But it took a long time, and so this has always been, this was first, our bedroom was over there. Half of this room was a bedroom, and then this was like a sitting room. This room in here, it was our dining room, and then our kitchen was next door. And then he took a part of the back kitchen, or back room here, and made a bathroom for us. And then there were 2 bedrooms upstairs. And we could just keep those doors closed, and his parents lived on the other side, and they had their own privacy.
Nice.
So it really did work out well. And then down the road, our first son, when he was married, they decided to build a house. While they were building, they lived in the north end of the house in an apartment. So this house has been
well used.
Changed around and used different ways, because when my husband Dill's parents lived here, they likewise moved in with the in-laws or with whatever, and they lived in the they had an apartment in the north end of the house. So yeah, that's sort of been the tradition here. It's just making room.
Yeah.
In this big place. So now it's just Dill and I.
How many children do you have?
Dill and I have 3 sons, Gregory, Benjamin, and Jesse. And they are all married, and Gregory lives across the road. He built a house, and he's been teaching at Southern Cayuga since he started teaching. He's a physical education teacher. Benjamin is our middle son, and he's a physical therapist. And he is married and lives in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and works out of the Dover Hospital. And he's in charge of the therapists there, the physical therapist and occupational and speech therapist. And he's also, again, picking up some patients, which he really enjoys and likes to do. Jesse, our youngest, is married. He's married to a girl from Union Springs. She was Kara Sofield. And they live in Connecticut, Guilford, Connecticut. And so with the 3 boys, we have 6 grandchildren, 5 grandsons, and 1 granddaughter. So, and 1 step-granddaughter, who was Janet's daughter before she married Gregory. So we're blessed with all these wonderful kids, and they're all, each year, of course, growing up. And our oldest grandson is now in RIT, going to college. So times change.
Yes, they do.
And our youngest grandson is 4. And he was thrilled to tell me that he had to go to school in the rainstorm the other day, but he had an umbrella. So I think that was a big deal for him to have an umbrella to take to school. We don't see them well enough to know. I feel like I don't know our Connecticut kids as well as our New Hampshire kids. And obviously
Right here.
Jackson, that grew across, and he lived here for his first 2 years, and that was a thrill to have him right here in the same house. So yeah. Okay, I think that's about all that. Oh, I was just going to mention about Elsie Yager. Now, Elsie Yager, I don't know if you've come across her at the museum at all, but she was a woman that had a bad car accident. I would say back in the maybe 50s. And she lived on the corner of Seminary Street and Main Street. And she was bedridden for years. And she would lay there in her south large window that's still there in that beautiful house and watch, the activities that was going on, people walking up and down. So I just remember walking down the street, going to school, and seeing her in there in the bed. And so Elsie Yager, that's quite a history there in Union Springs.
So that house was a Yager house, right?
I don't know how. I mean, she was an Elsie Yager, but I don't know
How long?
how long it had been. Right.
That's interesting.
Very. Yes.
The name I was trying to think of was Daggett's. They may have purchased the drugstore from my grandmother following the death of my grandfather. But I'm not sure. There may have been somebody in between. That I'm not aware of. But Daggett's did run that store for quite a while. And unfortunately, there was a sign called with the Dreamus Pharmacy or Dreamus Drugstore, but it got given away or got lost.
Yeah, we've looked for it. We've tried to find it.
Yeah, everybody's been
museum.
trying to look for it.
We
do have the sign that says ice cream, and that now I think it's with my nephew, my brother's son. But it's in storage right now. But my brother had that sign, and that was from the original store. It said ice cream. And there is a picture, and I'm sure it's at the museum, of somebody sitting out on the back stoop of that drugstore, would be to the west, cranking for the ice cream.
Oh, Oh, we'll have to look for that.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's just that I sort of remember it. My grandfather Doremus took a lot of pictures and, I guess taught my dad too about using the camera and so forth. But,
Too bad you didn't have the opportunity. You were one when he passed away, right?
I know, I would love to have. I thought, well, I wonder what I would have called him, Grandpa, or because I called my other grandpa, Grandpa Davis.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But he was very involved and he just was overworked and he was well liked. And so,
A cornerstone.
cornerstone in the community, right. So many of the pictures you have of parade, well, that was from my dad, I think. But my grandfather, had a lot of stories about that my dad would pass along. And Dill remembers some of them better than I do, but the lake would freeze so that my dad would ice sail in the wintertime. So that we have a picture of him out on this, like a boat with a sail.
Yes, we have that. We have a picture. We have a few pictures of him in a boat.
On the ice?
I'll have to look. I didn't think of it as being ice.
Well, he did do that, and also, he sailed. He made a couple sailboats, so we would go as a family. We would go out sailing. He kept it moored out there off of the. When all those, what were they called? Warehouses? No, boathouses that were along where the marina is now.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember there was this huge building that had, I can sort of picture the water, the noise the water made in there with the boats and the lighting, the way the sun would come through the cracks in the wood. These old boat houses. So my grandfather he had maybe an inboard, I don't know. But he liked to go out on the water. And then as a family, we would go, my dad got a boat. And then we had a 25 horsepower motor on it. And we thought that was wonderful. Well, gosh, you look now at these bass boats, 25 is nothing. Golly. It's like, okay. And we kept the boat up at was it Costelli's? No, up there in, at the marina. Oh, golly. Cars Cove.
I'm thinking Cars Cove. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I can't come up with the name of the place, or we always kept it. But, so we'd drive up there and get in the boat and go out for a ride. And then several of the families from the Presbyterian Church who were friends of my parents, we'd go out on Sundays and go for picnics. And we'd go through the lock or go off towards Seneca Falls and, stop along at a spot that looked like it wasn't being used and have a picnic and come back. And so that was always a fun time because we kids were all the same age, approximately, and just good friends and good family times. And I can remember different people on the shore saying, slow down, no wake, no wake, they wanted us not to go too fast. And that made sense. So.
Yeah. So I think we're good for the interview and what you have. Everything you said I found was very interesting and
Okay, thank you.
enjoyable. And it was fun talking to you. So thank you.
You're welcome. It was fun remembering.